Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. It is election time in the United States and we are looking at a series of candidates, and this is in one of those that we are going to be looking at. Here's a very interesting case. This kid, I have to say he's a kid because he's barely 24 years old. His name is Ashwin Ramaswamy, and I don't think he's related to Vivek Ramaswamy, but we will find out that from a fellow Georgian and my good friend Suresh Krishnamoorthy. Suresh, Namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you?
Namaskaram, namaskaram. I'm doing fine. As you said rightly, it is election time. Early voting has started in Georgia. I don't know about California, but early voting here
Yes, it is. Yeah.
has started in Georgia. And as you rightly pointed out, Ashwin Ramaswamy is a kind of an interesting phenomenon. He's a local phenomenon. I mean, you know, he is reasonably well known among the Hindu circles here. Now, I want to make it very clear, when I talk about Ashwin, I'm neither endorsing him nor am I opposing him. I'm just talking about his candidacy and what it means for the Hindu community as a whole. Obviously as Kona, we don't take a position on whether or not you should vote or should not vote for somebody. So we just don't do that. Ashwin he's a local kid. He grew up in the Johns Creek area, which is a suburb of Atlanta. I believe he went to Stanford and to Georgetown. So he has a typical, what I would call a 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪𝙥𝙥 resume, right? So he's done law, he did computer science in Stanford and so on. And it was a little bit of a surprise when he decided to get into the Georgia Senate race, right? Now, the Georgia Senate is these are always tough races. And what I found interesting and I found encouraging was, we have long lamented that the Hindu American community does not get actively involved in politics as much as it probably should. We probably don't vote as much as we should. We may not even register to vote as much as we should. We may not be voting in all the individual elections as much as we should, and so on. And our kids tend to go off into STEM. They tend to go off into professional stuff. So it's always kind of interesting when what I would call a quote unquote typical 𝗒𝙧𝙤𝘀 kid eschews his what I would call impressive qualification. I mean, he's got a law degree and a computer science degree, and then wants to get into public service. So I think from a Hindu community perspective, from a Hindu American community perspective, I think it's a good thing that kids like Ashwin Ramaswamy are getting into the race, right? I hope he inspires more of our kids to consider public service as a career.
And Ashwin is a Democrat and he is running for the state Senate of Georgia, correct?
Yes, yeah, he's running on the Democratic side, state Senate of Georgia, and in the interest of full disclosure, he's running against Sean Still, who's a sitting senator, and Kona has thanked Sean for his help with the Hindu community in the past as well. As a senator, Sean has helped us, get the Hindu phobia resolution passed. He's been very forthcoming about it. So, I mean, again, I want to be very clear. This is not to be taken as an endorsement or an opposition of either candidate, right? So from our perspective, we want candidates who will be sympathetic to the plight and the issues that plague Hindu Americans, right? We don't care if they are practicing Hindus, non-practicing Hindus, whether they are Republican, Democrat, Independent, really doesn't matter to us, right? So from that perspective, it's an interesting race because, yeah, Sean is on the Republican side and Ashwin is on the Democratic side. And from our perspective, it'll be lovely if both of them support Hindu causes, right? So for us, the issues matter.
So this is like KYC, know your candidate.
Yes, it is. It is definitely KYC, and each voter must do their own due diligence and figure out who they want to vote for. It is not up to us to say who you should or should not vote. That's not what we do. And the reason I speak about Ashwin is it's an opportunity for us to introduce from a Hindu American perspective. The question is, okay, what do Hindu Americans want from their candidates, right? That's often a question that is, and we've been doing a lot of thinking on that. I think there are a few things that we would expect. I mean, whether you're Republican, Democrat, really doesn't matter. Like, for example, as a candidate, do you accept that Hindu phobia is a thing? It exists and it manifests itself, especially in this age of what I would call relatively constant attacks on Hindu temples. Do we accept that Hindu phobia is real? Now, that's an important thing for any candidate who wants the support of the Hindu American community to acknowledge, right? So that's one. The other question is, of course, do they believe the popular story that Hindu Americans, when they immigrated to the United States, they brought with them this quote unquote, repressive caste system, and they are practicing casteism and caste discrimination today. Do they believe that, or are they willing to be educated on that issue, right? So these are the kinds of things that we want all candidates, Democratic, Republican, it doesn't matter, all candidates to be thinking about if they are looking for support from the Hindu American community.
Yes, indeed. And I must tell viewers that, we in California do have once in a while a state assemblyman or a woman or a state senator of Indian origin. But that generation, my generation, Suresh, you are more pronounced in your Hindutva than I am. I'm a late convert. Has been much more of kind of trying to de-emphasize our Hinduness. We never, in whichever way you think about it, we have tend to try to, or we have tried to conform, and maybe that's not something that should have happened, but it's now too late. We are trying to turn a new leaf, and I think having candidates like Ashwin, he has got age on his side. Even if he doesn't win this time, you need to first get notice that I'm here, I stand for these causes, and I'm going to work for you. And then that's like it's very important in politics. So I'm very happy that Ashwin has taken this step. Why do you think he decided to enter politics? Your opinion. I mean, it doesn't have to be like I woke up in the morning and decided, that sort of stuff.
I think in my opinion, I think he genuinely wants to get into public service. He is. I mean, to make it cliche, perhaps, my impression is that he genuinely wants to make a change. He's idealistic. He's young. He's idealistic. And there are lots of kids who are young and idealistic, and they don't necessarily translate that idealism into action. I think he genuinely wants to translate that idealism into action. Right? So the question is whether or not that action is amenable or supportive of Hindu causes or not. But that is something that only the future will tell. So, by the way, I just want to be clear: Georgia, the suburbs of Georgia, are finding more Hindu Americans running for office. For example, in a neighboring district, we have Narendra Reddy, who's also running for office. Narendra Reddy was a past president of the Hindu Temple of Atlanta, and he's a businessman in his own right, and he's running against it. And interestingly enough, his opponent is also an Asian American, Michelle Au. Right? So it is getting to the point where the suburbs of Atlanta, at least from a political perspective, are recognizing the fact that Hindu Americans are a big part of the constituency. Asian Americans as a whole, which includes the Hindu Americans, obviously, are becoming a bigger and bigger constituency, as many politicians have recognized, starting from Rich McCormick to Sean Still to Ashwin Ramaswamy to Michelle Au to Narendra Reddy to whoever else is running for office. And I think this is something that should be encouraged and duplicated elsewhere in the country as well. I mean, I would encourage all viewers of your show, if they are looking into their own areas, they should find ways to encourage Hindu Americans who are eligible to vote to register to vote and exercise that fundamental right. Because, like they said in that show West Wing, decisions are made by those who show up.
Yes.
And for way too long, we haven't shown up. and it's time that we showed up. So I see that as a very encouraging sign that we have more Asian Americans, Hindu Americans, particularly Hindu Americans, and Hindu Americans who are not afraid to openly acknowledge the fact that they are Hindu. I mean, there are lots of things that one can find differences with 𝗣𝗽𝗃 Ramaswamy, for example. But throughout his campaign, he made it very clear that he was not walking away from his Hindu identity. So whether or not you agree with his position, that is a personal choice. But it's important to normalize that, right? It's important to normalize the idea that you can run for public office and be who you are, right? I know you mentioned a few minutes ago that somehow you felt that I'm more of a practitioner and others are less of. I honestly don't think of it along those terms at all. I think people should be free to practice as much or as little as they want, right? It's not up to us to say how much, but I would like to be in a world where if you practice your religion to your best, to the utmost, you're not considered a weirdo, right? It is normalized. So the full scale is available, right? You could be the person who casually goes to a temple once a month, or you could be a person who does Sandhya Vandanam 3 times a day, right? Does a puja 3 times a day. That entire range should be open, right? And from a political perspective, it's nice to see candidates who are very open in where they are on that spectrum, right? So, for example, Narendra Reddy himself, he's been a president of the Hindu Temple of Atlanta, which is the biggest temple in Atlanta. He's a past president, and he's very open about that. And credit to the voters in Atlanta, that does not seem to be an issue. I don't see anybody walking up and saying, "Oh my God, you are coming from this heathen religion, and therefore you should not." I'm sure there are a couple of people here and there that might say that, but it's not a thing.
Very true. And I mean, the point I think I was trying to make was that Hinduism allows you to be wherever you want. That flexibility is there. And it's up to you how you want to be, because it's not really a religion as much as it is like a dharma, sanatana dharma, eternal flow.
Exactly.
It's been there for a long time, and you be part of the flow. All of us were Sanatanis at one point of time, and we continue to hold those ideals. We don't know that, but we know we are holding on to these ideals. So we wish Ashwin Ramaswamy all the best, and I'm going to try and see if I can get him in person to come on a hangout on PGurus, and stay tuned. And Suresh, I think I need to have you more on PGurus channel. You're so erudite. And the last time we talked about was about caste discrimination lawsuit in Cisco. You hit a home run there, and a lot of people watched it to understand the nuances. And that story is not over, by the way, viewers. It's still continuing. That saga is continuing. We'll revisit that. But Suresh, thank you so much for taking time out to talk to us about Ashwin Ramaswamy.
I appreciate that. So it's always a pleasure to be on your show. I think there are a couple of things I would presage and say there are a couple of things that are coming down the pike that we are looking at, and we would love to have a longer conversation with you on that. And that is, there is the systematic targeting that has started, systematic targeting of Hindu American advocacy organizations. There have been several hit pieces. There was one that popped up today, a long, huge, humongous hit piece against Hindu American Foundation. And along with that, Kona was mentioned a couple of times. And the narrative building that is happening, with saying that anybody who advocates for Hindu American rights is somehow automatically the quote unquote Hindutva right wing, whatever that means. So one of these days we need to have a longer conversation on why that's happening, what that means, and what we can do about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Suresh. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Appreciate it.